Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon in Gambier. I realize it may not be afternoon where you are. We appreciate you making time to join us. I'm Kim Wallace, and I work in the Office of Alumni and Parent Engagement, and we're so thrilled that you can join this reunion program and hope you will make it out to some other virtual reunion programs as well. We're very excited to have Timothy from the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with us today, and they are going to speak about the state of LGBTQ plus life at Kenyon. Timothy, take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much for that introduction, Kim, and thank you all so much for the work you've been doing on this year's virtual reunion. Quick apologies in advance if I have a cat that crosses the screen. I recently adopted a pet, and he's still learning, but he's doing a lot better. But just in case that might happen, he's very active right now. But thank you all so much for joining us. Like Kim said, my name is Timothy Bussey, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Associate Director in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Kenyon. And I'm really, really excited that we've had sort of a formal program as a part of this year's reunion to talk about the sort of state of LGBTQ plus life at the college. Through my 3 years at Kenyon, I've connected with a pretty fair amount of alums and have heard a lot about sort of what their experience as members of the LGBTQ plus community were when they were on campus, and sort of how those things have changed and shifted. So I'm really excited to share this with you all. And we will do probably about 20, maybe 30 minutes of kind of me talking and just sharing some general updates about what's been going on campus. And then we'll just use the rest of the time for any questions that you all have as well, and we can kind of chat more casually. So I did want to give just kind of a quick overview of what today's session. Everything okay, Kim?
Yes, I think someone just unintentionally.
Oh, gotcha. I thought that was you saying, hold on for a minute, sorry. I did want to give kind of an overview of like what we'll cover. This is not like an exhaustive list. It's kind of hard to like boil this all down into like a 30-minute package. But I'll give you all just kind of an overview of my position at the college and sort of what I do. I'll discuss where we were 3 years ago being very specific, as you'll see, because my role and my sort of specific focus area with Kenyon and with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion was sort of really restructured. So I'll talk about sort of where we were 3 years ago, and I'll chat about how we've been supporting trans and non-binary students, how we're more actively supporting the plus of LGBTQ plus. I'll talk about some of our major achievements we've had across campus and beyond. And I'll also share some insights about kind of where we're heading, where we're at now and where we're heading. So in terms of kind of an overview of my role with Kenyon College, and this is a photo of me from my like very first year on campus. I have grown a lot as our programs have also grown a lot. But Kenyon already was following a number of best practices to support LGBTQ plus students across campus. So in our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which leads initiatives focusing on students of color, LGBTQ plus students, first-gen college students, and a number of other groups. This work was already happening in our office, and this work was already happening across campus. But my role was sort of the associate and assistant director roles in our office were sort of tweaked with sort of additional focus areas. And so my role that I came into was really radically shifted with a really explicit focus on gender and sexuality, and specifically diverse genders and diverse sexualities. And so the work was already happening, but my position was sort of reimagined and transitioned into a much more LGBTQ plus focused role. But everyone in our office does work across identities, but we do have sort of specific focus areas with each of our positions. And so in my role, some of the things that I do include leading our Safe Space Allied Training Program, which is a training program for faculty and staff across the campus community. I also chair the LGBTQ plus advisory committee and our trans subcommittee. I serve as our ODEI liaison to the Cox Health and Counseling Center and the Office for Civil Rights. And we have other liaisons from our office that connect with other areas of campus like athletics. and I advise our now nearly 10 LGBTQ plus student groups, and I supervise the Crozier Center for Women and Unity House, which is our LGBTQ plus program house. And there's a lot more that is sort of falling under other duties as assigned. And a lot of other work that just sort of, when I joined the college, given that it was sort of such a reimagined role, wasn't necessarily fully fleshed out, because we knew that we were sort of in a position where, okay, we've got to see, like, what do we need to do? Like, where do we need to go? And so that was definitely a part of my early days at the college as well. So since then, this is kind of where we were 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, Kenyon College was ranked as a 3.5 out of 5 on the Campus Pride Index. And if the Campus Pride Index is something new that you're not familiar with, what that basically is a national assessment tool. It's actually the most sort of widely accepted and sort of widely renowned and comprehensive assessment tool for LGBTQ plus inclusion at colleges and universities across the country. So it's managed by a nonprofit organization that specifically works to support LGBTQ plus initiatives at colleges and universities across the country. So a 3.5 out of 5 is good. Like, that is very much like a solid place to be. And obviously a 1 or a 0 out of 5 is not a great place to be. And a 5 out of 5 is showing you're really doing a lot of really wonderful stuff. So this is where we were when I joined the campus community. Stuff that was kind of happening in like my first month, kind of reflecting back, was folks were already working on implementing more gender neutral restrooms across campus. That was something that the students were really clear that they needed. Apologies for the crash that you might have heard in the background. That was the cat jumping on the bookshelf. He's very fond of that. And students were also expressing that they really needed to have access to something called pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, which is a once-a-day pill you can take to reduce your likelihood of a new HIV infection by more than 90 to 95%, that they wanted to have access to that on campus. Students were also sharing that they needed to have an LGBTQ plus studies course, so a dedicated LGBTQ plus studies course that was actually housed in like women's gender sexuality studies on campus. And we were also sort of in the midst of encountering, which is like boring to talk about, but really, really important, challenges with pronouns and correct names being transmitted to various databases across campus. So places like class rosters, different student success profiles that other campuses would use. So what we had there was basically students that were encountering incorrect names or incorrect pronouns or no pronouns popping up in other areas of campus, and that causing a lot of friction and challenges for our students. So that's kind of where we were 3 years ago. And sort of since then, we've done a lot. I've kind of done it by a couple focus areas of trans and non-binary students and the plus of LGBTQ+, and I'll circle back to kind of a more general overview in a little bit here. But in terms of supporting our trans and non-binary students, we've been doing a lot of work on that. We have, sort of anecdotally speaking, a really high proportion of trans and non-binary students in comparison to our peer institutions, so like other colleges in the 5 colleges of Ohio, so like Worcester, Oberlin, Denison, OWU, but also just kind of generally speaking. So we've been doing a number of things and really letting the students guide sort of our work that's been happening across campus. So we've been ensuring that students, faculty, and staff can share their chosen names and pronouns across all database systems across campus. And that is something that was taken care of in my first year on campus. And so now we are no longer encountering that problem of students not being able to ensure that their correct names and their pronouns are on places like class rosters and these other database profiles. We've also been actively supporting students' potential HRT or hormone replacement therapy needs at the Cox Health and Counseling Center. So obviously not every trans and or non-binary person is interested in HRT, but we do want to make sure we have support there to make sure that linkage to care isn't broken for students who are in the process of taking HRT as a part of their transition and who choose to come to campus and study at Kenyon. So we've been doing a lot of active work there to make sure those students are supported with their health needs. We've also been expanding our gender neutral restrooms and housing options across campus. So I shared when we were there 3 years ago that was already happening, and the need has since just been continuing to grow because we've also seen growth in our trans and non-binary population across campus, and not just in our student population, but also in our faculty and staff population too. So that's something now, I think we're up to like 70 something gender neutral bathrooms across campus, which is almost unheard of for like any college. I did my graduate studies at the University of Connecticut, and we did not have 70 bathrooms across campus that folks could use. And so it's really in a good spot. We've also been like more explicit about where gender neutral housing options are on campus and where gender neutral bathrooms are in residence halls to make sure that folks can make really informed choices that support their needs for housing as well. We've also been working to facilitate free gender and or name change clinics on campus with our community partner Trans Ohio. That's something we do every semester. Since the pandemic, their organization has been doing everything remote. And so we've been directing students to the multiple remote clinics that are happening. But we've actually had, a lot of other colleges do not specifically host them for gender and or name change clinics. We've actually had some students from places like Oberlin and Worcester actually come to Kenyon for like the day of that event to specifically get their paperwork taken care of. We've continued to offer support for things like binders, GAF, legal paperwork fees, and other transition related needs through our student support fund. And we also have launched and continued to grow our Trans at Kenyon page, which is essentially a one-stop shop for trans and non-binary inclusion on campus. And the purpose of that being that we want to be really transparent about the support that we have and the resources we offer, but we also want to make sure that our office isn't sort of gatekeeping those resources and that folks are able to access them as they need to without going through another person. Because plenty of students do come to our office specifically for help on a variety of things, but we do want to make sure that it's transparent and accessible to anyone across campus. And there's definitely been a lot more, but that's kind of an overview of where we're at. I see the chat like kind of dinging. Oh, Kim, thank you. Kim is doing a lot. Curious what metrics are needed. Yeah, so the Campus Pride Index, oh, okay, question answered. Yeah, but the Campus Pride Index looks at like everything from academic life to campus safety, to inclusion in athletics, to policy, to housing, really every area of campus life. It's a really comprehensive thing. Sometimes you see these with like Princeton Review. Those aren't really, just thinking of like myself as like a social scientist, they're not really capturing everything. Like they're not capturing health and wellness information related to like LGBTQ plus students, for instance. And so Campus Pride Index is very much like heralded as like the best of the best in terms of quality of assessment that you're getting from that. And so in terms of kind of other areas of campus life we've been working on, I'll talk a bit about like the plus of LGBTQ plus. If you're not as familiar with that part of the acronym, so the addition sign at the end there, this is including a number of other identities, for instance, intersex folks, asexual, aromantic, pansexual folks, two-spirit folks, so a number of other identities within the broader community of diverse sexualities and gender identities. So there's a lot that's sort of captured there. Sometimes you see the acronym spelled out LGBTQIA+, so you see that specific like I for intersex or A for asexual or aromantic. But Kenyon has been actively supporting the plus of LGBTQ+ in a number of ways too. So we've been ensuring that our programming really does capture and showcase the broader diversity of the LGBTQ+ community. And at the same time, we're doing that intersectionally. So we're talking about the intersection of race and LGBTQ+ identities. So we're talking about ability status and LGBTQ+ identities, that we're also making sure to talk about the identities in the broader LGBTQ+ community that don't often get as focused upon. So like our intersex folks, our asexual and our aromantic folks as well. And one kind of recent example of that is for our LGBTQ+ History Month program this year. We actually did a focus on contemporary history. So we actually hosted an organization, Interact Advocates for Intersex Youth. If you're not familiar with them, they're a fantastic organization. They're a national nonprofit, and they're really the largest intersex organization doing work in the US. And so we actually hosted a couple of their folks to deliver our keynote address. So really making sure that intersex identities were front and center, as like the keynote event for that month. And I think we ended up with something like 150 people at that event, which was one really nice benefit of the virtual programming is we had folks from Kenyon on campus, but we had folks that were Kenyon alums, we had community partners, some students and faculty and staff from other or from other colleges and universities. So really, really wonderful to have them for that presentation. We've also been assisting our students with forming new student groups that really support their needs. So one of our newest student groups is Ace Space and Aero Place, or ASAP. And it is our student organization for asexual and aromantic spectrum students. So students who don't experience sexual attraction and or students who don't experience romantic attraction. And we are actually, I'm very, like as a member of the ACE community, specifically, I'm very interested to see sort of where other colleges are doing their work on this, because we've seen a lot of growth in terms of our students every year. We've seen more and more students that are coming in identifying as ACE and or Aero. And we've seen a lot of growth in that in terms of a trend too. And just kind of like nationally speaking, that's a big trend we're seeing with Generation Z in general. But Kenyon, actually, when we're talking about these colleges in Ohio, we're the only college or university in the state of Ohio to have a specifically ACE and or Aero student group. So we are far ahead on the game on that one. And we've also been continuing to provide our training opportunities, but we did a hard reset after my first year on campus. We did a hard reset on the college's Safe Space Ally training program, essentially to make sure that we were better representing the needs of our trans and non-binary community members, but also our intersex folks, our ACE and Aero folks, and that we were really working to make sure that that training program really encompass the broader diversity of the LGBTQ plus community, while also speaking to sometimes the unique needs that can exist across the community too. And we've also been showcasing these identities through a number of our programs, our major programs like the Kenyon Queer and Trans Studies Conference, which I'll talk about in a little bit. And we've been doing a lot more on campus in regards to this too, but for the purposes of keeping this closer to 30 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and move on with that one. In terms of some of our major accomplishments, this was kind of hard to like pin down because we have had a lot of stuff happening on campus and a lot of really, really wonderful things. I didn't want to do death by PowerPoint, and so I just found some images, and I'll talk about each of these graphics here for a moment. But in terms of some of our sort of big major achievements across campus, I'll kind of circle on this first one, the Unity House logo. So when I joined the campus community, Unity House had existed since really the early 2000s and was doing a lot of great work. It's one of our student-run programming spaces, and they had, at the time I joined, had just recently moved into a new facility that was very centrally placed on campus, and very intentionally centrally placed on campus with Snowden Multicultural Center and the Crozier Center for Women. Some stuff that we've seen is like the programming at Unity House has definitely grown. The amount of stuff of sort of students that use that as a resource has definitely grown. And kind of one thing that we've also been doing is working to make sure that the programming that happens at Unity House is also more intentionally intersectional and more intentionally focused on the broader community, broader LGBTQ plus community. So kind of one thing that we've actually done this year, it was scheduled to happen last year, but then the pandemic interrupted the month we were working on this. So we purposely delayed it until this year with the hopes the pandemic would be over and we could kind of celebrate it more intentionally in person. But we were working to update the Unity House shield. So previously it had the just 6-color rainbow flag for the LGBTQ plus community. And so we did an update sort of for 3 big reasons, and 3 big reasons that our students and faculty and staff really, really did celebrate across campus. One, we added the black and brown stripe to show that we are intentionally focused on intersectional programming and specifically focused on supporting the needs of LGBTQ plus students of color as well. We also added the light pink and light blue there at the end. If you were colorblind, that is where it is at, where my mouse is. But we also added the trans pride colors to make sure that we're also intentionally celebrating our trans community on campus as well. And the third reason was practical, but a reason based in inclusion nonetheless. The previous color scheme for the Unity House logo didn't have the outlining around the letters. And so for folks who were colorblind or had visual impairments, it was actually a more inaccessible logo. And so it's kind of a more practical thing, but thinking of another area of diversity and inclusion work, the new logo also meets those accessibility standards really clearly. And that was something students loved, and they absolutely loved that we were paying attention to sort of how something as simple as a logo can include or unintentionally exclude folks from feeling connected. In terms of other things we've been doing during my 3 years at the college, we've also been actively participating in AIDS Walk Ohio each year. So AIDS Walk Ohio has been going on for a very, very long time, since the early 1990s. So really the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And it is the largest fundraiser for HIV/AIDS service providers across the state. So everything from treatment to prevention work to just sort of public education about HIV/AIDS. But it also provides really critical funds to people who are living with HIV/AIDS for everything from dental care to physical health to behavioral health care, and really helps to make sure that those programs are accessible for folks who need them. And so this year we actually raised over, the graphic was produced, we got some last minute donations, but we raised over $2,300 for AIDS Walk Ohio. And so in the past 3 years, we've raised somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000. I should have checked the number, but we've raised somewhere between 7,000 to 8,000. We are consistently somewhere between like the top 10 and top 15-ish teams that participate every year. And I think kind of surprisingly to me, because usually OSU pulls a team together, and some other larger colleges and universities usually pull a team together. We were actually the only educational institution in terms of higher education that actually had a team in AIDS Walk Ohio this year. And it is totally virtual. We're not physically walking, we're all virtually walking. But that's been a really important cause, and we're really happy to do it. And I didn't necessarily mention this, but thinking back to that challenge that I shared when I first started regarding PrEP and HIV prevention. We also do now at our Health and Counseling Center offer PrEP, which is that once-a-day pill you can take to reduce your likelihood of a new HIV infection. We also offer that on campus. Our health center is actually the first place in the entire county that actually offers that on campus. And we work with our students to make sure they're knowledgeable about the variety of patient assistance programs via the manufacturer for Truvada, via the state of Ohio, so the Ohio Department of Health, and there's a few national programs through Health and Human Services. And so we actually work with our students to make sure that if that's a resource they need in their Safer Sex Toolkit, they can actually access that for as low as $0 per month. And that is a really, really fantastic thing. And we've also made sure to retain that coverage for our employees as well. So making sure that that health and wellness initiative is focusing on every member of the Kenyon community. I talked about a variety of trans-focused things that we've had on campus, but one thing that we've been really actively planning around is every year, obviously recognizing Trans Day of Visibility on March 31st, and also recognizing Trans Day of Remembrance and Resilience, which is a more somber, obviously, occasion on November 20th of every year. Usually with Trans Day of Remembrance Resilience, we have a little bit of flexibility with that date just because of Thanksgiving and where Thanksgiving can fall. We want to make sure students are able to participate if they are interested, but we've continued to do that even despite the virtual setting. We've really been intentional about making sure that we're not reducing the amount of programming, especially focused on our LGBTQ+ students and our students of color. In terms of some other big achievements, the NCAA, about 2 years ago now, coming up on 2 years ago, launched their Division III LGBTQ1 team training program, which is the NCAA's first training program that's focused on LGBTQ+ inclusion in athletics. And they solicited applications across the entire Division III athletics across the country. And about 50 people were selected to come on as the inaugural facilitators for that program. The state of Ohio has 2 total, one being myself here at Kenyon, and big thank you to Jill McCartney and the Department of Athletics because she is the person that really encouraged me and worked with me to sort of get the application together. And we have there's also a facilitator at Denison University in their athletics department. So we are one of two colleges in the state of Ohio that actually has a facilitator. And as a part of that, we actually travel, both the other facilitator and I travel to other campuses across the state and sometimes beyond a little bit, sometimes Pennsylvania and Indiana, to facilitate these training programs. At this point, nearly everyone, with the exception of some new staff members in our Department of Athletics, have been trained under the One Team program, which is an intensive day-long training program that also provides folks with resources to continue their education after that training day. But we've actually trained all of them and trained actually all the athletics folks at Denison University as well. But we've been continuing to deliver that training to other colleges and universities across the state. More recently, the Kenyon's conference, so the North Coast Athletic Conference, actually hosted a conference-wide training for folks. And so we've officially trained folks all across the conference, including conference staff with that as well, which is really, really exciting. And we've also seen a number of sort of inclusion measures at the Lowry Center, so the actual formerly the Kenyon Athletic Center. And we actually now have gender neutral locker rooms, multiple gender neutral locker rooms actually, to make sure that all members of the Kenyon community have a place where they can do what they need to do to exercise. We've also, in my first year, launched a new biennial conference, the Kenyon Queer and Trans Studies Conference. And this really grew out of the very direct need that students were sharing with us, particularly during my first year. They needed to have an LGBTQ plus studies course. We eventually were able to make that happen, and that is a permanent course that's offered in women's gender and sexuality study, or women's gender and gender studies on campus now. But the Kenyon Queer and Trans Studies Conference happened the year before that course was a reality, because we wanted to make sure to acknowledge and celebrate and recognize the needs that our graduating seniors were sharing with us. And so we developed this program. It was a day-long conference that had about 20 different workshops. And the first year had about 150 attendees, from more than 10 or so different colleges and universities across Ohio. We actually had folks that came from New England and the Deep South to this conference too, and about half of the attendees were Kenyon students. We have since, because it's an every 2-year conference, so biennial, and we actually had the most recent iteration of that conference this year. We had about 250 attendees for our virtual conference, still about 20 workshops. And of those 250 attendees, we really saw a lot of diversity in that group, which we also saw the first year. But in our most recent years, this past spring, of those 250 attendees, we had about 50 different colleges and universities that were connected to the conference. We also had, in terms of demographics of attendees, about 50%, over 50% actually, of the attendees were trans and or non-binary. Almost a third were specifically people of color, and then over a third were people with disabilities. And so we saw a lot of really nice intersectional demographics with the conference attendees, which is really great to see. And in terms of other things, I've got the logo right here for the Equitas Health Institute. So this is a statewide nonprofit organization that works on LGBTQ plus inclusion in healthcare settings. And the Institute is a part of the broader organization, Equitas Health, which provides direct care, everything from dental to physical to behavioral health care and prevention work across the state of Ohio. And the Equitas Health Institute has been a really fantastic partner for us. They actually have actively done a lot of training work with our Cox Health and Counseling Center staff. But this past summer, and I'm really happy to, I think for the first time, because we've just ironed it out, so I can share it with you all first and foremost, we have actually partnered with them to provide training to any provider in Knox County who would like to take advantage of it. And so what that basically means is we have provided the training opportunity through them and coordinated it so it's actually free for any provider in Knox County who wants to attend. And when we had that last summer, it was a fairly straightforward session about the sort of LGBTQ plus best practices in medical settings. And we had over 100 different providers from Knox County, as well as some from Licking and Coshocton and Holmes County as well. And so we really had a big impact with that. And that's obviously an impact that extends well beyond campus, because that is going to obviously be something that is going to impact the lives of folks who just live in those counties. So we've had a lot of really wonderful successes that we've seen and some major achievements. Probably the biggest, to circle back to that Campus Pride Index for a minute, probably the biggest is our Campus Pride Index. During my first year on campus, it went from a 3.5 to a 4.5. And then the second year, we closed the gap and made it to 5 out of 5, which we definitely celebrate. I want to be clear about this. We definitely celebrate this achievement, and it's really wonderful. There are less than 50 colleges or universities across the country that actually have reached a 5 out of 5. But obviously we do recognize that like that doesn't mean like, oh cool, we're done, we don't have anything to worry about, we're gonna sort of rest on our laurels. We're definitely not doing that, but we do want to celebrate it because it is a really big achievement, and it's an achievement that really speaks to campus-wide collaborations among our students, our faculty, and our staff. So we have a 5 out of 5, which is something really nice. Like I said, we definitely celebrate it, and it's a really wonderful milestone, especially considering that I think the official number is like 45 campuses have it. And then following that, we've also been recognized as one of the top 5 LGBTQ plus inclusive schools in Ohio by various organizations that are based here in Ohio. But we've also been recognized by Campus Pride Index. They actually work with an organization, Best Colleges, which does a lot of these ranking systems too. And they also recognized us as actually, in that small cohort of about 50 schools, recognized us as among the top 25 in the country. And so really, really wonderful things. And we're so, so excited about this. And yeah, we've just finished our Campus Pride Index for this year, and it's being reviewed, but there's no mathematical way that we are not a 5 out of 5 again. So we have also retained that, which is nice because our programs have only grown since then. And so I wanted to kind of close out with a few additional things. So if you are interested, if you're interested in sort of staying up to date with what we're up to, we do really make sure our LGBTQ plus community pages on the Kenyon College website are up to date. They're very clear, and you can get a good sense of what's going on campus. We like to do that obviously for not just our current students, but also our prospective students and our alums as well. So if you're interested, feel free to kind of explore some of the things we have there. Obviously, the Office of Alumni and Parent Engagement does coordinate with our LGBTQ plus alumni group. So if you'd like to get on that listserv, I think Kim can probably speak a little bit more to that, but I know we're trying to sort of breathe some new life into that group. And if you're interested in supporting these programs and initiatives, if you're in a position where you feel comfortable or you'd like to donate and you'd like it to be specifically geared towards an LGBTQ plus focused program, we do also have information on our side of the site about how you can specifically and directly donate to the Student LGBTQ plus Diversity Fund, which has been really critical to a lot of our success. And thank you to alumni John Schofield. I don't know if John is on, I haven't looked at all the names, but he has been really, really critical to a lot of our success in making sure that we have the financial resources to have achieved all of this and to continue achieving more. And then of course, like feel free to connect with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We'd be more than happy to chat about sort of what's going on campus or how you can help support our LGBTQ plus students if you're interested in doing that in another way. And I left out a ton of stuff that we've done, but if you're interested, we have a lot of it on the website. We partnered with the Gun Gallery. It just like hit me that we didn't even mention this, but we partnered with the Gun Gallery, so the Campus Art Museum, to host a virtual exhibition of the AIDS Memorial Quilt, which was so, so powerful. The exhibit never opened in person because it was planned to open after spring break in spring 2020, but we did partner with them to do a virtual tour, and they did a lot of really wonderful things with various classroom initiatives to provide that as an educational opportunity. And I was particularly honored to be able to do that because we, in bringing those quilt panels to campus for display, we actually made sure that all of the panels that were brought were specifically connected to Kenyon in one way or another. So a couple of those panels were alums and a couple were connected to faculty and staff at the college who had loved ones that died during the HIV/AIDS epidemic. But if you're interested, that video is still up. That was like the early day. That was like our first program that we really did on Zoom, I feel like, or one of the first. Um, so please watch it with grace, just in terms of the sound quality. But we've learned a lot since then. But we really are happy that they celebrated that and really worked to make that happen with us. Super thankful for the Gun Gallery for that. But yeah, so I will stop talking because I want to make sure we have about 20 minutes. I'm also Southern. I'm sorry, we overtalk sometimes. But I will stop sharing this so we can kind of see one another if y'all would like to come on. And feel free, if you have any questions, I will take a peek at the chat. But if you have any questions that you'd also like to ask anonymously, you can also message those directly to Kim or myself, and we can read out the question, but not read out the person who sent it. So I'm more than happy to do that as well.
Timothy, do you mind if I ask you with my voice right now?
Yeah, that's also totally
Great.
fine.
I'm really curious.
Purifier though, because I can't quite hear.
I was really curious about your comments about generational differences. So I attended Kenyon. I was class of 01/02. And there was some visibility of people on campus, mostly lesbian and gay. And you mentioned how Gen Z, maybe millennial generations, really resonated with how you provided gender neutral bathrooms, you paid attention to ability in terms of the logo. So I'm just curious what trends colleges are seeing with the younger and younger students around, people willing to be out and willing to access resources.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in terms of some of the big trends that we're seeing, and this is still kind of emerging with Generation Z, but some of the big trends that we're especially seeing among Generation Z is that we're seeing a lot of folks who are definitely familiar with like non-binary folks, first of all. So I think it's about nationally, about 30% of Gen Zers report that they not only know about not that they know about non-binary identities, they actually know a non-binary person, which is a really big jump. If you look at that, not quite so much between millennials and Generation Z, but if you look at Gen Xers and baby boomers, that's a big change. So that's something we're definitely seeing. In terms of kind of other areas of demographics, we're definitely seeing a lot of identities in plus of LGBTQ plus. So a lot of students who are identifying specifically as like pansexual, whereas maybe like 10 years ago, you might have seen like that student maybe would have identified closer to like bisexual, for instance. We're seeing a lot with like asexual folks on campus too. And that's really happening nationally. It's not just Kenyon. I mean, we're seeing it on campus, but other campuses are seeing it too. Like I was just on a call with Oberlin, and they were asking about if they have students on campus for a summer term. And so they were talking about Pride Month programming and sort of picking our brains about like what would be an idea. And they mentioned that when they did some planning for Arrow Week, which is in February, celebrating aromantic spectrum identities, that they had students that were very excited when they were like, oh, maybe we should plan something for this. And so we're seeing that across like campuses really. But you know, we certainly do still have some of the what you might think of as like a more traditional challenge, I guess, of like coming out. Like that is still something that we do work with our students on. We do have students that need support around that. Like there unfortunately still are folks that deal with unsupported families and have to sort of deal with that or find themselves in a situation where they need summer housing or winter break housing on campus because they don't have a familial home to return to. So we do still actively support a fair number, not a substantial or huge number, but we do have a handful of students that you know, we work with them on that. And our office does provide, obviously, just to be clear on that, we do provide for students in that situation. We cover and help as much as we can with their housing costs to make sure that they have a safe place to be. Did that answer your question? I hope. Okay. There are a few questions in the chat that I missed. Are there other people in Knox County able to use the health center to get PrEP? So unfortunately, no. So the health center, and that's the big challenge, right? The health center is only student facing. So what that means is if you're an employee or if you're just a Knox County community resident, you got to go somewhere else for PrEP. The good thing is there is a new provider at Knox Community Hospital that is prescribing PrEP. So that's a cool thing. that's happening. The other really interesting thing is before everyone was thinking about telehealth because of the pandemic, Equitas Health actually launched a teleprep program to reach folks and just sort of recognizing there's tons of people that live in rural places that might not have a provider that prescribes PrEP. So they've been providing that service and really filling in some critical gaps. So the answer on Cox Health and Counseling is no, because they are only a student-facing health center. But we do also share information about other resources like teleprep, for instance, on our pages, just to make sure that folks, even in the community, are more aware that they have a variety of options. But also for our students too, because maybe they want to go somewhere else for PrEP. That's a decision everyone gets to make for themselves, right? So I'm really happy though that Equitas Health provides that, because it's really important, especially when you think of like demographics with new HIV infections in rural populations. There is a private question. Thanks so much for sharing today. Very different than my years on campus. Very heartening as the father of a trans daughter who's graduating from Pomona College. Oh, thank you. That's so nice. And thank you for supporting your children. That is also really good.
Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
This is Taylor from class of '83, and similar to the comment you just read, I'm just amazed at everything that you've told us that you are doing and supporting. When I was there, the Gay Straight Alliance was started during my years by a straight student. There were no out gay students that I knew of, and I wasn't even comfortable myself to think about being gay at the time. Had the school had some of these resources, I might have found a partner years earlier. So I just think it's a wonderful thing, and I'm so envious of kids today and the world that they're in, that they have so much more opportunity to be themselves. It's still tough, but it's great that they have the support to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing all that too. Like, I really appreciate it. And I just want to clarify too, like, this is like, it is my role to like direct our LGBTQ plus initiatives, but this is the work of a lot of people and a lot of people before me too. And so I really want to acknowledge that, because and we've also, it's pretty interesting through talking to some alums and then through like just sort of random like happenstance, have found a few things like I didn't realize like Kenyon College was one of the inaugural sponsors of a day without art. So a day recognizing the impact of the HIV/AIDS epidemic on the arts community, founded in 1989. And I didn't realize that. And so I went on kind of a deep dive through like the college archives with some folks from the Gun Gallery, and the faculty member who initiated the college's participation in that program back in '89 is still around in Gambier. And we're actually working together. We're going to be working together this World AIDS Day to actually recognize World AIDS Day, which we do every year, but to actually recognize it with the exact same program that they did 30 something years ago, which I think is going to be really cool. I think folks are going to respond really well to it. But it was so interesting to be able to see that in like the college archives, to be able to dig that up. And someone else said, I'm just floored how far Kenyon has come since I was there in 2001. This is great to hear. Yeah, thank you so much. It's been interesting. We actually, in reference to PrEP, folks might be interested in this, but it was actually a Kenyon alum who actually helped our nurses at the Health and Counseling Center with like the various medical questions. So the chief medical officer of Equitas Health is actually a Kenyon alum from the 90s. And he actually took the time to help them in figuring out sort of what questions they had about like clinical guidance and that type of stuff, and had a direct hand in really supporting that and making it happen.
Could I say something briefly?
Yeah, of course.
I'm so impressed with what you all have done, are doing, and will do, dedicated. I am class of 71. And so I went to Kenyon. I wanted to go there, thought I'd get a better education there when I went in, turned down Princeton so I could go to Kenyon. and I never regretted it. That's not against Princeton, but I thought this is the place for me. I was also born at Kenyon, but didn't grow up there. But I went through and came out in London in 72 because of a Watson Fellowship. I needed an ocean between me and what was before. I'd come out to a family, but I hadn't been able to live out anything until I finally got to London. I ended up working in a free clinic later. And since 74, I've never had a job teaching anywhere or researching. I've always been out, and also working working to be supportive of gay liberation, and then it's changing over time. And but I've written some things about what it was like for me, that trying how to come out, not for other people, for myself. But I have vivid memories, and I'm so glad you all are doing it. Sometime during this reunion, some of my songs will be played, including one which is about coming out, called The Other Side of the Morning.
Yeah, that's so good. Thank you so much for sharing all that with us, Fletcher. Similar to you, actually, I came out before in my undergrad, and it was not smooth. Was not smooth, but I ended up doing a study abroad program to put an ocean between me, so I could kind of have more ability to sort of explore my identity and see what I wanted out of life. And yeah, it was very beneficial. But yeah, thank you for sharing all that. Any other questions folks have? Like, you can drop them in the chat, you can come off mute, you can have it more conversational, whatever y'all want. And I do see we have John here.
I'm curious, Timothy, unless John wants to say something. I'm curious about life after Kenyon. So one of the challenges I experienced as an African-American student who was at a different socioeconomic level than my peers at Kenyon was that I went back home after college and didn't quite feel prepared for the working world that was actually accessible to me. So I had a lot of challenge around finding my place in the working world compared to where I was aimed when I was at Kenyon, but Kenyon's in the middle of Ohio and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. So I'm curious how transition is thought about, and I mean transition from college to life, from an LGBTQ plus perspective, in that a lot of students are going to be returning to places where maybe are not as inclusive and embracing as Kenyon. I was just shocked at just the embracing of diversity. Like, Kenyon was just this wonderful place. I went back home and I was like, what is happening here? Like, I was just shocked left, right, and center about lots of things. So how are you, it's so wonderful at Kenyon that you can be yourself, you can get supports that help you, but how do you help students go back to wherever they're coming from?
Yeah, so in terms of like specifically kind of joining the workforce or finding like that first job to start your career post-college, we do, as a part of kind of our LGBTQ plus strategic plan, we do at least minimum once a semester, even during the pandemic, make sure that we're doing some type of programming with the Career Development Office. So some type of programming that is specifically focused on the LGBTQ plus community. So some of those in the past have been presentations on how to come out in the workplace, ranging from how to decide if you want to do that, to how to do it and in what space, time, that kind of thing, and really how to do that from a very practical perspective, to salary negotiation workshops, so how to negotiate that job offer. Just recognizing that like LGBTQ plus folks, like people of color, like women, do deal with lifetime pay disparities. Like, we know that exists, and we know there's a wage gap there, and we know it affects LGBTQ plus folks too. So working to sort of provide those opportunities has, I think, been really, really helpful and critical. But in terms of kind of how we make sure our students are ready to succeed when they leave campus, thinking of like some of our trans students, like one is like having that name and gender marker done. Like, if someone's ready for that, making sure that like we have provided the resources to connect them to that. to make sure that that's sort of taken care of. That can be really important for like a number of things, like leases on apartments, for instance, credit reports, like all of these like sort of adult focused things, right? That sometimes the students don't necessarily think about. And one thing that we also do is really make sure that we're connecting them and providing ourselves as a resource. So I've had a lot of students that when they're getting ready to graduate, sort of sit down and want to have a conversation about, how do I make sure I move somewhere that has like some type of legal protection? How do I know that? Like, how do I look it up? And so, really doing that on kind of a one-on-one basis of like, hey, let's talk about what you are concerned about and let's figure out how to do that, and showing them. Rather than just like doing it for them, like, oh, here's a list. I found a list for you. And really the same with like health stuff too. That's really the perspective the Health and Counseling Center takes with all students, not just LGBTQ plus students, but really making sure that they understand like, hey, if you get a medical bill, here's how to read it, and like here's what you need to know. And so some of these kind of life skill things that I don't think every college takes the time to like teach us. But even in ODEI kind of more broadly, we do sort of a number of like practical like skill building workshops that aren't just focused on like one specific identity. So I think that's been super helpful for our students too. And we also provide ourselves as a resource after too. So we do have sometimes students that connect with like, hey, I encountered this, like, what do you think? Like what resource might be there?
That's awesome, because people are of any marginalized or less represented group or have less access to mentors or people like them wherever they are, where they can ask. So all of these things you're speaking to are relevancy and helping people ground. So I love it. Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no worries. Any other questions folks have? Sorry, I'm leaning down. My cat's like giving me, he likes to give, I've been told cats like sometimes give you a little like nip, a little bite if they like you. So I think it's a good sign, but I think he's also just full of energy and he does not want to play with any of the toys around the desk.
I wanted to honor, can you hear me?
Yes.
I wanted to honor who in 1974 had, as far as I know, the first meeting. It was for students and faculty, whoever wanted to come, about justice and sexuality. And it wasn't specifically named gay liberation, but that was a part of what it was about. I had the luxury of just being there for a semester after my Watson, so I was the only person who came out openly. But these individual stories of our lifeline, I came out to my parents when I was 15 without having deeds. And the very, very stressful thing for me was that my father did not want his side of the family to know I was gay. And so I promised I would do whatever I could except lie to make that happen. So I became a public person in terms of media, singing in the United States peace songs, but in Europe where I was living, I could be on TV and sing after the huge Honolulu demonstration, biggest till that time in Germany, on TV. So it was a split life. And it's not just about my own story. Every individual person that you help and the others help, she or he or they have their own individual stories. That's never just the example of fitting into a particular category. They're also unique. And then the help is also to be unique and still understand that other people have some experiences that may resonate. I'm just very inspired, and I shouldn't go on talking so long, but I'm ancient. At 72, I guess I get to.
Hey,
Thanks
no,
again.
I appreciate it. Like, honestly, like I really wish we could have done this. I mean, I like that we're doing it virtually, so it's happening, and so we can see people and potentially get folks that would not be able to travel. But I hope we can do something. I know in 2015, the college did a big celebratory weekend around National Coming Out Day. And I want us to be able to do something like that again, where we can really have like sort of a program for like LGBTQ plus alums. And I know Kim and I have talked about sort of engagement around LGBTQ plus alums and getting folks sort of some type of event going on in the future, along with the LGBTQ plus Alumni Association, which I know Kim has been doing a lot of work to sort of help with setting that group up for success. Sorry, I was just reading the chat. Oh, you're in Argentina. Yeah, I'm happy that you're able to join us. Like, thank you. And so, yeah, definitely like having the virtual stuff is super helpful for folks. Kim, not to put you on the spot, but would you like to share how folks can sign up for that alumni list?
Sure, absolutely. So some of you may know there has been sort of with waxing and waning popularity, structure, what have you, a Gay and Lesbian Alumni Association was the name that it lived in its prior incarnation. I only joined the Alumni and Parent Engagement team a little over a year ago, and the historical records that were left on that were not the best. But in talking with Timothy, of course, we also want to make sure that a reinvigorated organization is more inclusive beyond simply those identities. So we're really hoping to be able, we were hoping to be able to reinvigorate something with an in-person reunion this year and have a moment for folks to actually gather and have a cup of coffee and chat. Hopefully we will have that in our next in-person reunion. But we're really hoping to bring folks together who are interested, whether just simply being on a mailing list or whether being involved in sort of a more leadership role and kind of crafting what the goals and initiatives that organization might undertake. Because we have many alumni organizations that really range in terms of what they do and how much work they do, whether they're more programmatic, whether they're more supportive. So we really want the people who are in the organization to guide and lead that rather than myself as a staff member articulating a mission of a group. So if that's something you're interested in, you can email alumni@kenyon.edu. You can also email me personally. I'm wallace1@kenyon.edu, and I would be happy to keep you on a list, but also to chat and have further conversation if that's something you'd like to learn more about and talk more about.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Kim. Sorry for my cat's appearance, but he really wanted to play, and I was like, please stop scratching me when I'm trying to speak. I was like, this is not the time. But yeah, if you're interested, please, like I said, please feel free to message or email Kim. One thing that like I would really selfishly love to do with our alums is I would love to have a panel of our LGBTQ plus elders. So thinking of folks that came out, particularly in like maybe the 60s and 70s, or maybe came out later in life, but were on campus then. I would really love to get that perspective. Like as someone from the South who really benefited from a lot of community knowledge from my LGBTQ plus elders, I think it's important. And I think we need to show the importance of it to our students. So if you're interested in that, you can also feel free to message me or sign up via Kim. And hopefully that's something that when we get to non-pandemic times, I would love to do that type of event in person. But if you are interested, please feel free to let us know. Yeah. Any final questions folks have? And I'm gonna drop my email because a few folks were like, wait, I'm interested. I'm gonna put my email in there just because I wanna make sure we don't miss anyone. So please feel free to drop me a line there. That way I have it like all saved. And when we get to post-pandemic, we can be in touch about that. My email is also all over the Kenyon website. Type in Kenyon gay or Kenyon trans and you'll pop up a bunch of stuff. So I think that's it then. But thank you all so much for joining us. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much to Kim and y'all's team and Alumni and Parent Engagement for all the work y'all are doing to make virtual reunion happen this year. Thank y'all.
Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you coming, and thank you, Timothy, for sharing all that wonderful information.
No worries.
Thanks so much. Every good wish all around.
Thank you so much, Fletcher. Bye, everybody.